Hi everyone, namaste. If you've been watching my vlogs lately, you must be aware that I was a part of corporate law conference, and in this conference, I had the honor of having a word with Mr. Ashwin Krishnan, who is a partner at Indus Law. We talked about what are those different things that are important for a law student to know if they want to get into corporate law. So I'm very sure that this video will help you. And before we move on, I would like to thank Mr. Ashwini Krishnan sir that he agreed, took time out for this video. Let's get in. Hello sir. How is your experience of the whole conference going on?
It's a good experience. I think it's nice that Nirma is doing this. I think it's very good for students as well to get that exposure. So yes, I think overall wonderful.
These type of conferences, how do they help law students?
Okay, so I think at a very basic level, the fact that see as a profession, you're always an outward profession, right? So you have to have your dealings with clients. You have to have the exposure with people who are going to hear you and try and figure out, what you're saying. Does that make sense to me? Does that address my problems in life? Right? So I think that an exposure where everything that you're saying, everything that you're presenting is something that's been looked at someone, right? So whether that's us or anyone else who's doing that as a panel, I think that's a good exposure to have. Plus, I think it also makes you think about your subject in a little more detail, right? So you've chosen it, so there's no reason to not get into as much depth as you want in it. So it's also something that will encourage you to think in that manner because you're presenting it in that sense. So.
And what does a good research paper look like? Like you had a look at not all but some research papers.
Yeah. I think from a research purpose perspective, I think the most important thing would be to try and see what is your question. What is the question that you're trying to answer, right? Because you could keep writing about problems, right? But it's very important to identify, okay, what is that one question that I'm really trying to find an answer to? I may not have the answer for it either, but right, can I give a direction to it, right? What is that problem statement? Right? I think if you get a problem statement right, the answer should flow a lot more naturally. Your research direction will come a lot more naturally. But it's important to try and identify a problem statement, at least for our own sakes, in as simple form as possible so that you know that, okay, fine, this is the direction that I want to write and this is what I'm trying to find an answer to. Right? These are the problems that we have. So I think the problem statement, I think, is the most important thing to try and identify as clearly as possible.
For all those students who are aspiring to be corporate lawyers, and there are many, so what would that one piece of advice or what will those areas of strength be that you would suggest? ये strength areas होते हैं corporate lawyer के. What will those be?
मैं एक strength नहीं बोलूँगा, okay? Because I think there should be many. Some of it would be, your communication. You should be able to read the law and be able to actually try and find the problem statement that I was trying to tell you, right? It's important to try and identify the problem statement. Apart from that, you should also be able to try and have some more interest. You should actually be able to try and use your time in college to try and see, is this something that interests me? The time that I'm spending in this, does it feel like I am spending the time or I'm using the time, right? So if your answer to that is likely to be a use of the time, then you'll probably try and get a sense, okay, this is the direction. Because corporate law also today is getting so broad, so wide. There are so many topics that you could try and look into. I think it's all available, but communication, your ability to read, you do need to get into depth, right? So there is a lot of hard work that is involved. So a lot of skills that you need to try and get a good combination of, and of course find yourself to be able to get some joy out of it. I think those would be very important.
Are LLMs of any value for a corporate lawyer?
I think the most important thing, I don't want to skirt your question, but I think the most important thing would be experience, right? Which is why a couple of things that I would try and identify is, like an opportunity to get to intern is also a path to experience, right? So there's a good thing to learn, right? It's very good to learn. Right, of course, gaining more knowledge is always very effective, but I don't think there's anything to, what can you say? I think there's no alternative to actual work experience, right? Because even when you were in college and you passed out from college, the first thing you try and realize is there's a big difference between what I have just read to what someone expects me to answer for them, right? So I may be able to read things in one way, but then when someone gives you a question saying, hey, what is the question to this what is the answer to this problem rather, you look at the same sections, the same provision very differently, right? So drawing that link between the two, at least for me personally, only seems to come when you're actually trying to solve a problem and you're actually into work experience. So while I don't discount any LLM experience at all, I think that's it can be used to leverage your strengths further, right? Hone your strengths further, fine tune your strengths further. But I think the single most important thing would actually be work experience.
And one piece of advice that you'd like to give to law students, you may be noticing law students right now, and that one piece of advice for them to do good in their professional life.
This is for people who are already in law school or yet to go to law school?
Both, they are a mix of them. So you just
Okay, maybe the advice should rather be to people who are already in law school. I think now that you're here, I think you should try and make best use of your time to broad base your knowledge as far as possible, right? Learn as much as possible, but also use the other avenues that college tries to provide you, right? You want to pick a sport, pick a sport. You want to pick a hobby, you know. You'll realize as you grow, right, the one thing that you want is you'd also want to expand your horizons, your line of thinking to beyond just the academic line of it, right? And these are all things that help you, like I said, I mean, it's nice to have a conversation with someone or something that's not law, right? These are all things that help relationship building, and it's good to have, you know, interests that are outside of maybe law. So I think the most important thing as someone who's in a college today is to try and make sure that I'm using the avenues, the peers that I can use to learn as much as possible, which needn't always be just, law subjects, like what you're doing. Right? It's good to try and hone my other skills, my other interests. Everything is a skill that I have picked up and I'm good at. Right? So you never know how and when that's going to help. Good to get a nice balance of the world.
And one thing that I noticed yesterday, we had a social night. So there were a lot of first year students from our own college and other colleges as well. And they were very hesitant to talk to people. Like partners to दूर की बात है. Same year के दूसरे colleges से लोग होंगे. उनसे भी बात करने में they were very hesitant. So one tip for them to network better, to talk about things.
I would actually, the simple answer to that would be don't be hesitant. Right? Easier said than done, of course. But maybe also think of it from the perspective that the other person is also likely to be hesitant, right? That whoever is on the other side was in your shoes someday, right? We've all gone through the same rigmarole. We've gone through the same experiences. We've all been first years. We've all looked at that, old man or old lady who's standing there, whether or not a partner, who seems to be, okay, how do I approach this person? Say XYZ things. It's okay. They've all been in the same shoe, right? The only difference may be that, okay, fine, they've done this now 10 years in those shoes, 20 years in those shoes, right? So I think it's just about trying to, make sure that don't undersell yourself. Don't think that, and today especially, I mean, you guys are also, forging your own paths, things that no one may have thought of are things that can be done. So I think the smartness is definitely there. So don't think as though, just because someone is 10 years older, 20 years older, they necessarily know everything that is there in the world. So I think the hesitancy is something that, there's no answer to it. There's no technique to say that, okay, if I do 1, 2, 3 things, I will not be hesitant. I think it's just about making sure that, you're willing to take that step. It's okay, right? I think the worst that can happen is the same position that you've been without asking.
Yeah. So just barge in.
Barge in. Right. Of course, barge in politely.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's a technique to that in that sense, that you can pick up and say, okay, fine, I've now studied this, I know I can talk to anyone in this world. It's again something that will just come. You have to try. You have to give it a shot in the dark. See how it goes. You'll realize, and I think you'll get better with it.
Right. I guess that will help a lot of law students or students who are going to enter college. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Thank you.